to the 7th edition of the TinyLab Talks. The main question today is: artificial intelligence, the future belongs to the robots? Tiny Talk Labs are a brief, informal talks between researchers invited by the University of Aveiro and researchers from the University of Aveiro itself through the American Corner program on topics such as technologies, innovation, research, and culture. The conversations will usually take place here at the US American Corner Media Lab with the support of the US Embassy in Portugal. So, to start, I will give a warm welcome to both our guests today. Catherine Avery,
Yes.
research scientist in artificial intelligence and computational linguistics at the MIT Media Lab, and Luís Seabra Lopes, researcher at IETA and professor of informatics at Daqui here in the University of Aveiro.
Yes.
I'm Liliana Oliveira and I will be the moderator. So, first question. Catherine, will the world tend to be a better place with artificial intelligence or not?
Well, I definitely think the world will be a better place with AI. I think AI is going to enable a lot of advances that will make it easier for us and will make life better, ranging from things in healthcare to being able to better and more efficiently produce food or help make the world greener. And so I think that's very important.
Yes, I think also artificial intelligence promises a lot, so it can
Yes.
give a lot, be useful in many different ways. It also has many risks, and these risks are some of them very immediate, others more long-term and less predictable. But I think, yes, there are promises and dangers that we should all pay attention.
And I think the fact that we're talking about it now is actually really important, because the earlier, even though we're not technologically where we would have to worry about some of these things, the earlier we think about them, the more ready we're going to be for what we have to
I think
solve.
we are, the persons that work in artificial intelligence, we like artificial intelligence.
Yes.
We have fun with artificial
Yes.
intelligence, and of course we like to think that it is useful. But everyone else should also look to the progress, and philosophers, people from the social sciences should all be looking at it.
Well, in China, we are already served by robots in the restaurants. In the Middle East, there are robotic police. We anticipate a great revolution in the world of work, in jobs, our jobs. For example, the OECD estimates that 9% of global jobs are at risk. So, how can we circumvent this apparently negative impact? Stimulating machine-human collaboration, or some other ideas?
I think in the immediate future or in the near future, I think there is no real problem. I think there will be a certain impact. Some jobs will be automated and therefore people will be free to do something else, but new jobs will be created. So in the foreseeable future, I don't think we must pay attention to the impact, we must monitor what is going on, but I don't think there is a real danger. In the more remote future, where in fact we can have very advanced intelligent machines, etc., maybe we get to do nothing. We have a lot of free time because the machines do everything. And then the impact is, how do we live without having something to do that justifies? So we are created to work and earn our living, earn our
In the short term, there are some industries that have real impacts, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think those industries are mostly in sort of logistics or supply chain, basically any kind of industry where you're driving goods or you're picking goods up in warehouses or in an industrial setting. A lot of those jobs are getting automated.
Yes.
And I think when you think about the more creative jobs, a lot of anything that's people-centric, anything where you're talking to people, where you're negotiating, where you're trying to generalize things or use skills from different areas, we're not near that. And in part because AI is actually much less near that than it looks.
Yes.
And then you might be afraid of. AI is not really good at things like generalization or drawing conclusions by looking at one thing and applying it to something else. But for the industrial sort of jobs, I think that's something we have to be cognizant of, especially understanding, what can people learn how to do afterwards. And there was very recently an announcement that Amazon was going to retrain a bunch of its warehouse workers to do other things. And I think that's the important thing we need to understand, is when a lot of these more industrial jobs or more supply chain jobs go away, making sure people have a path to do something different.
So universities could have here a very important role, namely in redefining our competences. Do you agree? Or
I think universities are great because universities teach people how to think and reason and think more creatively, and as long as it's not just about memorizing things, which universities aren't. So I think the more we emphasize skills where we learn how to learn and where we learn how to be creative and collaborative, then that's something that's going to be very important.
Yes, I think the world is changing very fast, and this rapid change is also a challenge in itself. Computers, artificial intelligence, this is all creating this faster and faster change, and it's a challenge for us, for humans, for people. Some people are more prone to adaptation, they adapt to different changing conditions. Other people work more, or they function more in a more routine way, so they like to do more or less the same thing throughout their lives. And this rapid changing, always changing world is a challenge in itself, I think.
People have to have another skills, maybe.
Yes, but the fact that, so in my parents' time, someone would, for instance, study and do the same throughout their lives. Now we have to adapt continuously to always learn new things, and this is a challenge. Not all people are tailored to this, and so there is a revolution going on, and people should be aware of that.
People used to, it's been going on in some sense for a while. Also, people used to get out of school and work at the same company their whole life, right? And now, at least in certain parts of the U.S., if you work in the same company for more than 4 or 5 years, it's shocking, right? It's something that no one would do in certain age groups and professions. So I think there's been this adaptation to be good with more rapid change that we have to go through.
Yes, it's a challenge, I think.
Mm-hmm. We all know Sophia. It's a robot that has a human physiognomy, and she is able to maintain a conversation and even to create some empathy. Will it be possible for a robot to have emotions, to love, for example? Are there human characteristics that robots will hardly be able to acquire? Where is the boundary?
So when it comes to things like Sophia, a lot of that is actually done by people, right? It's done by people behind the scenes. It's pre-written by people, or there are people controlling. I've seen how it works, right? And so in some sense, it's kind of a preview of things that we could have down the line when technology advances, but that's not where we are right now. A lot of that is just almost a demonstration of that kind of thing.
It's a pre-programmed largely,
yeah,
although
exactly.
It looks very interesting, but it really passes a wrong idea of the state of
which
and
is difficult,
Catherine
right?
works in natural language processing. she better than most of us can evaluate how plausible that is at the moment.
Yeah.
It's largely pre-programmed, although nice, but
Yeah, and it's sort of this could be what the future is. And I think right now, having a kind of long-term conversation with a computer is something that we're actually really, really bad at. And that emphasizes something else, which is I think there's a lot of questions around some of the things we need to learn and do in AI that will really take us to the next level that we haven't even started addressing yet as a field. And
Yes.
I think people see the rapid change of progress and they don't expect any big bumps along the way. I think there are going to be big challenges for AI in being able to do something like what it looks like Sophia is doing.
yes, one of the things that I discuss in the early stage of an AI course is what is the goal of artificial intelligence as a science engineering field. And there are several traditional views that different authors present. And but the prevailing view today is that AI exists to develop solutions to automate the solution of problems. But there is also another competing view that is AI wants to emulate the human being, to create a machine that behaves like us in every way. So this is always present, and some researchers work towards this. Who knows what they will be able to succeed, to achieve, but in fact, most of us work on more practical things that solve specific problems.
I think the two of us very specifically work on very practical things. Like the lab that I come from at MIT is very much about how can we take stuff that we're doing with AI and solve real world problems, either to make the world a better place or for specific industry sorts of solutions. And I think something that we've noticed, interestingly enough, is that there's been this huge interest in AI, but over the last 6 months or so, there's been an increasing interest in AI that solves practical problems, which tends to be the AI that is very successful when you put it out in the world. AI that looks interesting or is trying to be a big brain doesn't have as much impact as AI that's trying to solve a very specific problem.
Yeah. What is also the fact is that there are thousands of researchers in AI throughout the world. And suddenly there can be a breakthrough, something that leads us to another level of performance.
Who knows?
Who knows?
Right, exactly.
So this can happen. Let's not deny that suddenly very important things become possible. And going back to your question, which was also about emotions and the boundary between machines and humans, I think that emotions already exist in machines in some way. They don't have to be the same emotions as ours, but they already exist in some form.
And this kind of goes back to your, what is the purpose of AI? Why do we research AI, right? And then there's the other side. There's another group of researchers who are trying to understand how we work by researching AI. And to some degree, we don't know how emotions work in people, really. We don't have a great idea of how brains work on a deep level.
Yes.
And so it's hard to say.
Exactly. It's different. It's a different
it's
thing,
very different.
but does not mean that they don't exist anymore. So in one of the talks that I gave earlier this year, this issue of emotions also came from the audience, and they said, "Oh, a robot will never be able to appreciate how good is a specific food." Oh yes, of course, that kind of emotion the robot will not have, but it can have other emotions. Some of them very compatible to ours.
I mean, there are researchers I know who are working on sort of both generating smells and taking in smells. So there are researchers trying to get to everything.
Yes.
It's all over.
You can tell us some emotions.
You see,
examples.
I also am not I'm not a neurologist, not a neuroscientist, so I cannot talk about so in depth about our own emotion system, but so emotions have to do with reactions, with motivations, with a number of things that drive feelings, heuristics. So have to do with very low level things that drive the more conscious behavior of the entity. And in that sense, this exists in machines already,
I mean,
in robots.
we also have emotion. We also use emotions to communicate as well. So emotions are very big in the way people communicate. And sometimes we have emotions that we have and we use because we want other people to engage with us, and sometimes we have more private emotions. And I certainly see, you know, at least on some level, especially in sort of the pre-programmed stuff, we're seeing people try to engage through emotion, right? If we are outraged with service we got at an airline on social media, we want the airline to respond to us. And if we tell somebody else, oh, I was very disappointed in that experience, that's a much more private emotion.
Yeah.
And so people study which emotions are more public and more private, and so they have different sort of focuses and ways of thinking about it.
Okay, so what do we have to do to benefit from the opportunities, or those kind of opportunities that this technological revolution will create?
So I think there are a couple of big things we need to be thinking about. One of them is what AI folks call explainability, which is the idea that when an AI is doing something or it makes a decision, it needs to be able to communicate to you and to me why it's making that decision. And that's really important, because building AIs that are good at working with people and can tell us why they're doing things tend to be more ethical AIs. They also tend to be easier AIs to use, because we don't want to just build AIs for people with PhDs to use, right? We want to build systems that everybody can use no matter what their job is. And so I think we're starting to realize that we need to be able to look inside the box and understand how things work. And I think that's very important.
Yes, I totally agree with this issue of explainability, and the rest is, so depends on what the machine or program or robot will do, but there are tasks in which the task is completely automated, and so the artificial intelligence is in the machine, and the machine is totally autonomous, and in other contexts the machine must interact with us, and therefore it must be intuitive, must be easy to communicate with the machine. The machine must be able to adapt because the environment changes, the user needs change, there are new tasks, new objects. So there are also here in Aveiro we have this kind of focus. We are trying to learn or develop mechanisms that enable long-term learning of the machine to support this adaptability.
Okay, so now we will open the talk to the audience. So I ask to the people if you.
So do you think that will ever reach a general artificial intelligence?
Ever is a really long time, so yes. Yes. I mean, I'm a little, honestly, I think as a field, we are focusing on a lot of problems that are low-hanging fruit, that are easy to accomplish right now. And I worry about what happens when we pick all that fruit, right? And whether or not we have taken the time and built the skills, the overlaps with other fields we need, the connections to social sciences, to psychology, to linguistics that we need to jump the next hurdle. And that's something that I worry about. That's going to happen between now and then.
Yes, as you all know, we have our participation in RoboCup. So I was tightly involved in that in the beginning, and I went to several RoboCups years ago, and I remember what the promoters of RoboCup said at that time. So it was around 2000, year 2000, and they were arguing that just like airplanes, so airplanes were invented around one century ago, a bit before maybe. And the progress in aviation was absolutely exponential, and now we were eventually able to go to the moon and to other places around the Earth. So that this exponential evolution would also happen in robotics, and therefore the goal of RoboCup was to have the human champion team in soccer playing against the robotic champion in 2050. Time is passing, and now we are in 2019, so in 31 years, in principle, we should have that. I think we are not going so far, we are not going fast enough to fulfill this prediction, because I think it is much more complex. So we are talking about the reasoning, the learning, the reactivity, it's very complex. It's far more complex than developing a machine that flies in the way of airplanes in which there is a pilot and everything. So yes, I think as Catherine said, yes, maybe eventually we'll get there. It may be faster. It may be because, as I was also saying before,
Something happens.
Maybe there is a
expect.
breakthrough at some
Right.
point that changes completely, and then the evolution is much faster. But at the moment, we don't see it coming so soon. But there is even a artificial general intelligence conference where people exactly go there to discuss complex architectures to achieve what you were saying. But we are not near.
One question from the chat, from Margarida Almeida. How do artificial intelligence is nowadays changing our daily life? Where can we find artificial intelligence even if we don't notice it?
Artificial intelligence is kind of everywhere, which is fantastic. I actually think it works best when it blends in and you don't notice it, right? And I think that's the sort of I think a lot about interaction design, and that's sort of my goal, is that I want AI to blend in with what we're doing, and for us not to say, oh, I'm using Excel, right, which has AI in it. You know, I'm not using a spreadsheet with AI, I'm using a spreadsheet. So places we use it every day. Anytime you report a problem, and I know this because I've had spin-outs in this area, anytime you report a problem with a product, there's AI there. Anytime you search the web, there's AI there. There's a lot of AI when you search the web.
Yes.
Anytime figuring out things like when you need to replace the produce in a store to make sure there's always, tomatoes for you to buy. There's AI doing that. Figuring out, when to release a new sneaker, AI helps with that kind of thing.
Yes, I think it's very pervasive already.
Yeah.
We even see announcements of mobile phones with artificial intelligence so now it's in the news, it's in the publicity.
So now people like to say it, but
yes, now it's a selling keyword. So people also, and there are also misconceptions about what AI is. So AI is today very tied to, for instance, deep learning. So some people confuse or machine learning. AI is much broader than that. So it's pervasive, it's badly understood.
Okay, so to the last question, in 2 minutes, is it possible to foresee how our way of life will look in 50 years? 50 years?
Difficult.
It's very, very difficult. It's very difficult. So I think in 50 years, I really hope that we have places where AI lets us have time to build better and deeper relationships with each other, because a lot of the busy work gets automated, right? So we can actually help each other out and get to know each other and spend time a lot better. That's one thing I hope. Something else is that I really hope that we can use AI to help us build a greener world. And I'm somebody who loves nature, so I'm really interested in that. 50 years is a long time, though. It's really hard.
It's hard to predict. I think, for instance, cars, there is already a big hype around autonomous car driving or self-driving. Even that, I think maybe there are some problems in the path that before it becomes a very common thing. But yes, I think at the pace that we see the artificial intelligence applications appearing in daily life, I think there will be a lot of that. And but how far we will go in 50 years, I think it's maybe unpredictable, because it's this exponential progress and this acceleration that I think we should all be also discussing. It's because it's also the result of competition between companies, competition between countries. This can be good, but maybe we should think and reflect a lot about it.
Thank you both.
Thank you so
for
much.
your participation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We also thank to the support of the US Embassy in Lisbon. The next Tina Lab will happen in September. Stay tuned to our social media networks to attend the next talk, and thank you for coming. Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you.